The United Kingdom prides itself on the NHS, its decade-old healthcare system.
But the interesting thing about the NHS is that even though it prides itself on trying to be humane and trying to provide care to everybody, what happens is that if you are focused on satisfying society as a whole and subordinating individual needs to that of the society, oftentimes individual needs are neglected.
This problem with the system became apparent and exposed when Julie Bailey took her mother to Stafford Hospital, about 2 hours away from London. Neglect among patients became obvious to Bailey with the handling of her mom and those around her.
She saw, very rude nurses, oftentimes didn't have medication available for patients. They'd leave food out of the reach of immobile patients.
Even though healthcare in the UK, with few exceptions, is free and made available to all, in 2011 the UK spent only $3,405 per person on healthcare, while the United States spent $8,508. The UK's healthcare budget now stands at $160 billion, roughly 1/6 of government spending. Julie Bailey saw her mom die in that hospital.
At one point when they were preparing her to actually be discharged from the hospital, her mother was dropped by someone who wasn't really adequately trained in handling elderly patients, and within weeks of that she died. Now, you never know. It's up to God as to whether or not she would have died with or without that.
Comparisons can be drawn between the NHS and the Affordable Care Act, but also key differences.
I think it's interesting as the United States sort of embarks on our own experiment with government health care. Now, clearly, let me stipulate, there's a lot of key differences between the NHS and Obamacare. Obamacare is essentially a system in which the federal government subsidizes people to purchase insurance, whereas in Britain it's not an insurance-based system. About roughly 90% of people don't have health insurance, private health insurance in the UK. They just go to a government hospital and they don't see a bill generally. So it's a different system.
But the question remains,
will America sort of rebel against more government control in a way that hasn't typically been the case in Britain? Or over time, will they get more and more used to it and conditioned to it and become more passive as a people?
For WashingtonExaminer.com, I'm Lisa Rule.